Jeff Clavier, everyone. Come on up? How you doing?
Hey, good to see you. How you doing?
Good. And actually, before I introduce Jeff, let me just mention, and I'll probably do this again at the end. We have another event next week. We do the events usually monthly, but we didn't do one last month. The founder of Meetup.com, flying out from New York. Scott Hifferman is coming out. Is going to meet with us and do like a Q&A. And so if you have any gripes about Meetup, like too many emails, which is a gripe I have, and I apologize for. And then next month, early next month, we have a guy named Rod Swanson, who you've never heard of, but you've heard of the product that he works on. He's the godfather of the Electronic Arts EA Sports brand, and he's going to come give this amazing. He's like the best presenter I've ever seen. He's going to come give this hour-long presentation about how to build an amazing consumer brand and get people to give you $60 a pop for an updated roster on a game of Madden. So excited to have Jeff, one of the Valley's most successful investors, and trained computer science degree in Paris, was a lead technical guy for several big companies, including Reuters and Ethics. He's funded a lot of companies that I'm sure you all touch every single day, like Get Satisfaction, Bitly, Ustream, Congregate, Fab, Bleco, Fitbit, SendGrid, which is one of my favorite startups. They're awesome site. And then he's invested in companies that have been bought by basically anybody you can imagine, but people like Facebook, Groupon, Twitter, and eBay. So how did I do?
And AOL 3 times.
AOL 3 times. Okay.
And thanks to AOL for once again having put this amazing building in the valley for us. Not only for us, but for us all.
Yeah, let's give AOL. Is anybody from AOL here? Gosh.
It's kind of late. Oop.
We could give AOL a round of applause. I know that Tim Armstrong has a camera that they pipe in, and he's watching. He's watching us. Jeff, just to start out, I want to ask you a couple of questions, and we're going to do something a little bit different in terms of how we're going to have this conversation tonight. You've been investing for many years in the Valley. What is the difference that you've seen entrepreneurs, say, from 5 or 6 years ago? What have entrepreneurs learned in the last 5 or 6 years?
So 5, 6 years ago, you had the first generation of consumer internet companies. So we're looking at 2003, 2004, and it's basically the very beginning of, hey, we think that the internet as a platform is actually completely legit. And at that time, you had to be a bit suicidal to actually launch yourself into a consumer internet play, because it was still the time at which all these consumer, like web 1.0 companies had died or were dying or had finished dying, and VCs were still sort of not interested in funding those companies at all. So you were up for a very challenging environment in terms of talking to potential investors. Now, the web as a platform is completely legit, and you have amazing distribution opportunities between Facebook and Twitter and YouTube and the iOS and Android operating systems that give you access to hundreds and hundreds of millions of users. And so how you sort of take advantage of that is really the number one core skill set that you have to have: distribution, and then design, which is how you can actually please your users and get them to love your product so much that they rave about it, and get you new users that way. So those are the two sort of major changes: design and distribution.
And you've talked about that recently, that that entrepreneurs should focus on simplicity and design versus technical specs or performance. Can you talk a little bit about that? Why is that so important in the companies that you see or invest in?
I don't think that technology is actually no longer important. It's that marketing and design ended up being sort of as important as technology in a lot of those consumer internet opportunities which we focus on, to be honest. And so where we would actually spend a lot of time looking into the back-end design and how things are built, when we were due diligencing an opportunity maybe 4 years ago, now we're spending more time around flows and marketing and distribution and customer acquisition strategy. And if ever people don't have that I wouldn't say nailed, because at the early stage it's difficult to have it nailed, but don't have a good sense as to how they're going to go about it. That's a big issue for us.
What are you seeing right now? Are you seeing there's been a lot of talk of that just there's all these companies that were funded at the angel level. They're now coming in for Series A. They're not able to get that funding. Are you seeing that with your companies that you're having or not you specifically, but just companies in general, that is this a real trend that's happening, that companies that raised angel round are now struggling to raise a Series A because they maybe shouldn't have deserved as an angel round or some other reason?
Well, so there was sort of something which made my good friend Dave McClure angry over the weekend, which means that he tweeted a lot with a lot of expletives. He owned Tech Meme for like a couple of hours. So
I thought that was just his life, isn't it? Just angry? Is it one angry thing after
it's
another?
not Angry Birds, it's Angry McClure. And so he pointed rightly that there's a lot of companies that have been seed funded that actually don't need to raise a Series A per se to survive, because they manage to get to cash flow break even, make money, and therefore they're completely free of any investor obligation. The thing which I pointed to myself is, it is true that some companies actually manage to break even after their $500,000 or $1 million seed financing, and that's awesome, because once you break even and you make money, then you're completely free of any outside sort of obligation. However, a lot of companies do need to actually raise some money after they have proven a few milestones at Series A, and that's where the math sort of hurts, because with the seed stage being so popular these days, because unfortunately, and I say unfortunately, it's kind of cool to be an angel, and so a lot of people are investing because it's cool, not because they actually love supporting entrepreneurs and they want to be involved in backing the next big company in the making. And so when these people sort of get behind a company, typically they say, hey, I'm going to put 10,000 or 25,000 behind this entrepreneur. They never think about the life cycle of that money. They never think about what to reserve and what to sort of put aside for the entrepreneur to survive on if ever the first chunk of money is not available or is not sufficient for them to prove that they are worthy of a Series A. And because there has been so many companies being funded at the seed level over the past year and a half, and there aren't that many sort of Series A funds per se, even though there's a few new sources of capital, you have sort of a 10 to 1 or 20 to 1 ratio, and not every company is worthy of raising that big chunk of money, so it's sort of natural, Darwinian life that some of them sort of disappear. It's just going to be a bit more accentuated because of the disparity between what has been funded at seed and what has been funded at A. But, it's sort of the circle of life of startups.
And how many startups would you say that you see versus how many that get funded? Just to look back at this, so you said perhaps 1 or 2 out of 20 deserve a Series A. What?
I'm not saying deserve. It's mathematically
just metric driven. Yeah. And then what percentage or what number would you say get angel funding out of all the companies that you either see, or, and not just from you but just in general? So if 2 and 20 get to the Series A, how many get to the first round?
That's a good question. So we tend to have a very steep curve in our own sort of funnel. So I would say we say no to 99.5% of the people we see. It's kind of tight to get money from us.
So we're all screwed. No, I'm just kidding.
No, mathematically one will get it.
Well, we were hoping actually maybe at some point you could just stand in the middle, you throw hundreds in the air, and then everyone could get funded by.
It's not
Jeff
the way
Clavier.
it works, I'm afraid. I don't know. I think we're so specific about what we fund and how we fund and the way we fund that I would say about 10% of what we see gets funded.
Yeah.
Because not everything that comes to us is worthy of even a seed funding. Some things typically are just not meant to be funded by investors. We get sometimes people trying to fund their movies, people trying to fund a concert. I mean, we see kind of interesting things sometimes. Not all the things are worthy of VC financing. People are trying to find, some sources of capital. And angel and VC capital is really meant for things which have sort of a scale potential. So things which can really take off and become the next, Mint or Fab or something like that, where whatever you invest in, the next guy could potentially take it at 3 or 5 times the price and still be happy and interested in investing in it.
I thought maybe we could, just in kind of talking to some of our members in the audience that we have, I thought it might be really interesting to walk through the kind of some of the nitty-gritty details, like pull back the onion a little bit of how these things actually happen. Mm-hmm. And I was writing the questions for some of these things, and I thought this would be much easier if we actually not role play. Don't want to start doing weird role play, but if we considered for a minute, let's say I had a meeting with you, right? Let's say I'm setting myself up. I'm a founder. I'm an entrepreneur, and you and I get a meeting. That's where we start. We started a meeting. I assume. How did I get there? How did I, at the very basic level, did I get introduced? Did you respond to a tweet? How does that even happen?
So so typically, if you get a meeting with us, you've already passed the 10 to 15% threshold. So a lot of people will reach out to us mostly by email. Don't reach out to us by phone, fax, cards, singing in front of our door, sending us a tweet, reaching out to my children, really bad, or sending someone sent me a card which was yay big, which got therefore stuck at the main Palo Alto sort of post office, and I had to go there, to grab it. And I remember the postman saying, "What the hell?" Didn't find that guy. So we get 200 to 300 opportunities roughly by email a month, and the ones that we really sort of pay attention to in priority are the ones which have been introduced to us by someone who's sitting between you and us. And that's typically one of your friends, fellow, alumni from your school or some colleague of yours or whatever, but someone who basically knows one of us, and, us is myself, my partner Charles, or Stephanie works with us, who's going to say hello and then get mobbed, and someone who basically knows us, who can vouch for you as an entrepreneur, saying, I've spent, a bit of time with that person and I understand what he's doing, and this is why I think he or she would be a good fit for you. And the reason why we use that sort of social proof of sorts is that we need to find a way to basically, cut through that deal flow of ours and figure out which of the 200 or 300 opportunities we should actually meet. Yeah. And we won't meet more than 30 or 40 people. So figuring out who sits between us, and the good news is that, LinkedIn is a tremendous, tool for that. You could also use, Twitter and figure out who I tend to listen to, because I only follow like a couple hundred people. And though I'm not sure I would listen to the guys that I follow on Twitter if they were sort of introducing me a deal. But anyway, let's assume I do. And you find sort of that intermediary step between us that shows that you've actually done a minimum sort of research to sort of get to us. And even though it's really unfair to say, we won't look at cold calls or cold emails, that's the way we do it, because we just get such a volume. And statistically, in 7 years, I have never seeded or funded someone who had sort of reached out to us cold. So, it's a pretty good metric. Then we meet.
Okay, so we meet. Yeah, so we meet. And what am I presenting? I might present, like, when you see successful. So if I'm doing a good job, am I presenting a beta? Am I presenting a launch product with metrics? Am I presenting a business plan? I'm assuming not. But tell me what I'm presenting that might catch your eye.
So you got there because what you're proposing to do is sort of one of the main themes, or something that is sort of intriguing to us. Yeah. And so we'll take the meeting and say, and sometimes we'll take a half an hour meeting or half an hour phone call because it sounds interesting, but we're not sure, and we don't want to waste your time, and we sort of don't want to spend time on something that we don't think is sort of squarely in our sort of focus. So if you look at our website, softtechvc.com, two T's, you'll see that there is a pretty clear sort of set of buckets that we invest in, and you're welcome to sort of send something to us which is not exactly the kind of thing we do, because there's this others in the buckets. That means that we'll look at sometimes things which aren't sort of core to us. But if you have something in the mobile services economy, if you have something in vertical SaaS, if you have something in e-commerce, except deals, we don't do daily deals anymore. We'll sort of be happy to take a look. And if you're here, it means that whatever you pitched us was interesting. Typically, the people come to us with, I would say, an advanced prototype of the service with a minimum level of customer development which has been done. So they might not be launched yet, but they've done enough sort of research with a pool of early consumers, customers, users, to sort of help us understand how the product's going to be used potentially at scale. And then we'll want to understand. So we think about three things: team, product, and market opportunity. We call that, I made up the name, the 3 S's rule, if ever you've heard that, which is basically a smart-ass team building a kick-ass product in a big-ass market. And that's the secret of venture capital. If you understand that, you've understood everything. And so team is the one thing that is the most important, obviously, but not enough to us. We still want to see the product and how differentiated it is, and why you have sort of this passion for this kind of potential opportunity. And then, are you building, and this is really important to us these days, are you building a real company? Are you building something that will get to eventually, $50, $100 million in revenue? We're not asking for you to prove the revenue model early on, but we need to know that this is something that can actually, at some point, become a real business. Because traction-based businesses can be lucky, but we'd rather do something around transaction, subscription, and so on and so forth. That's what we're most comfortable with.
If you're standing in the back, you can come stand along here. You're welcome to come sit in the front as well.
So that's the first meeting.
Yeah, so that's the first meeting. So one question on that is with the consumer. Yeah, so this last point that you mentioned, at that very basic level, even if I'm a consumer web product or business, you still expect me, or do you still expect me to have some level of monetization figured out, some level of revenue, or how I'm going to do that? I mean, how specific would I need to get on something like that if I'm coming in and presenting?
We'll spend more time on your customer acquisition strategy and what you've sort of tried or proven in terms of getting users to come and visit, and the cost of that. So doing very basic landing pages, using AdWords or Facebook ads, and so on and so forth. Things which are completely easy and things that we expect you to actually have done. In terms of the business model, if we see that this is a freemium model, if this is a sub model, there's a bunch of proven sort of techniques to monetize. And so if you say this is what we plan to use and this is how we sort of have validated that people would be willing to pay for something, and we tried this landing page and people said yes, 5% or 3% or 7%, we understand that you understand what it takes to actually go through that monetization journey. If we ask, have you tried to do some cohort analysis to see how your 2 or 3 or 4 cohorts will actually potentially improve in terms of conversion, and you say cohorts, what is that? Then you just shoot yourself in the foot. So it's much more figuring out that you have understood the basic mechanics of user life cycle than that we'll want to sort of spend time on. The monetization is obviously great if you have it, but we'll spend less time if we think that this is a model that we've proven in the past. We've done 110 investments in the past 7 years, so we've tried a few things that worked and many that absolutely didn't work. And so, I had that case 2 days ago where someone said, oh, we found that amazing opportunity that no one has thought of. We're going to help the browser extension market to monetize because they don't, and we found the way to actually make it happen. And I said, many have tried and they failed. It just doesn't work. That's why you don't see it happening. And the guy was like, oops. And so that's sort of we don't know better ever. We just have screwed up so many times that we just use that memory to analyze all the new opportunities.
So I walk out of the meeting. I'm like, man, that went really awesome. I nailed it. And then what? Have you made a decision? I mean, how far along the path have you said, you know what, 70% chance I invest this guy, or zero? You know, can you? Oh, that's kind of weird.
That was a sign you failed. You didn't get the investment.
Is it because I'm bald?
Light goes off.
So what? I think they're right over there. Actually, Spencer, if you want to try and hit one of them. So how quickly can you make a decision? Do you make a decision that quickly, I should say? Is it can you sit down and meet someone and say, I'm probably going to invest this guy or not? Or what is the next process? What is the next step?
So think of us as, so we've been doing this for 7 years now. Well, I've been doing this for 7 years, and this is going worse and worse. It's going to disappear soon. So we only do 1 to 2 investments a month, roughly 20 a year, and that's 20 out of 2,000 to 3,000, which means that we have ways to actually go through a process fast, but we'll never cut through the process. And so the process for us is, you know, there's a team of 3, and everyone has to meet, you know, and we try and meet, you know, 2 people at a time, and then maybe the third person sort of meets in a second meeting. So we want to meet the entrepreneur or talk to the entrepreneur and make up our own mind independently, and then gather and share sort of the few things that we need to test or validate, and then we'll you know, do a couple of reference checks, and we'll call potentially a couple of customers or people in our network who are experts in the field that we're investigating to get sort of a reference or a view. If ever, like it is, I'm thinking about this last investment opportunity that Steph and I have been working on, and we met 2 to 3 days ago. It's been sent to us with a very strong signal from one of our CEOs, who happens to be one of the strongest product CEOs we know on the planet. And so he said, this is a product which is awesome. This is why I'm actually using it, and I'm actually investing, and I'm joining the board. So thinking about strong signals, that's a hyper signal for us, because this is someone we respect highly, and guess what, is in the portfolio. And so Steph took the first call, I took the second call, Charles is going to talk to them on Wednesday, and we have 24 hours to complete our due diligence to make up a decision on Thursday morning. So from initial chat to decision, 6 days. That's pretty quick for us. Quick. Some others, typically it takes 2 to 3 weeks. We try and make a decision from 10 to 10 days after the second meeting. So whoever meets second after the first meeting, which is kind of triage, we try and sort of give an answer, which is unfortunately most often no, after in that period of time, because you don't want to waste time on a fund that is going to pass.
And in terms of the due diligence, so you might spend a day on that. You might spend 24 hours. What are you're digging into the team or more? So you're digging into the team. I mean, talk just quickly a little bit about what exactly that means. Are you doing, you know, are you checking backgrounds? Are you doing blood tests? Are you doing? I mean, what exactly are you guys doing?
So you lie down and then talk to us about everything about your childhood. No,
CAT scans.
So we typically try and figure out who in the references that you've given us are the most relevant sort of people to talk about you as a founder, and we'll try also to figure out that we're compatible, because, you know, when you invest at seed, most companies will be in your portfolio for, you know, 3, 5, 7 years, and so you'd better be compatible and enjoy working together, because even though the interaction isn't you know, daily, it certainly is important that we feel that we can actually productively work together. So we'll also go back to the person who introduced us, and that's why that sort of person in between is important, because we'll ask about you, and so if they know you well, then they will become potentially the person that will act as your reference and can point to, you know, your strength and potential areas of improvement. So that's the personal side. And then there is the market validation or the product validation, where the good news when you invest in 100+ companies is that you have experts in your portfolio, pretty much anything in terms of technology, market, sector, vertical, or whatever. And so we go back to these people and we say, this is the opportunity, this is what we've been looking at, what do you think, or could you talk to that team and tell us what you think? So the sort of third-party expert or third-party sort of validation is also important to us.
Okay, so just to recap, so I got through the first gate, which was to get a meeting with you via probably somebody you trust or somebody on your team trusts.
Yep.
You liked the meeting, you liked me, potentially, you liked the idea, you liked the product. So then your partners, I also meet with them.
Yep.
I may or may not pass those gates. Then they start to do some due diligence on me. They dig in, they talk to our references. I pass that gate. And then, if the stars align, maybe you invest in me. And so.
And then at that time, we sort of.
How does that work? So like I mean, do you present? Do you send it? Do you like send a check? I mean, how does that work from that point of? Hey, okay, we made this decision. Do we get on a call? I mean, what is the process?
So. We, the team meets twice a week. We meet on Mondays 8 a.m. and on Friday 8 a.m. And Mondays are typically planning the week. So which are the companies in the funnel, and we have, this funnel management tool or deal management tool that has, whatever, 1,500 or whatever deals, because we started using it like 5 months ago. And so we look at the short-term funnel and which companies just got in and what we plan to do this week and which companies we think are going to be sort of the most important in the funnel. And we'll work through that funnel, and new companies will be brought in. And as we sort of progress with due diligence, there will be sort of new tasks and allocations or things to do. And then on Friday, typically it's a chop time where we sit down and we see what we've learned about the companies, and we decide, which ones we're going to continue and which ones we're going to pass on. Mm-hmm. And so if we say, this is your company, and this is what we've learned, and this is what we learned about you, and so on and so forth, and we feel that this is a real opportunity, and this is a round of $1 million at whatever for pre, and we always want to invest at least the equivalent of 5% of the company, and if we lead and put the round together, 10%. So in that case, we would want to invest, let's say, $250. Mm-hmm. And so we'll discuss about the merits of making investments, knowing that in order for us to invest in you that month, you need to be sort of the most interesting companies, or one of the two most interesting companies of the month. And sometimes we end up saying, damn, we have, 5 which are interesting, and the ones we prefer are this one because of X or this one because of Y. And sometimes we actually don't agree. And being a small team and having to sort of live and manage the portfolio afterwards, we can't be in a situation where I call that this is an investment which I want to make and force it upon my team, because then, we'll have to manage that investment for 6 years, and if ever it fails, I don't want the situation of saying, hey, told you, sucker.
Blew it. Yeah.
And so it's really sort of everyone has a voice, everyone has a vote, and we get there by consensus, which I think is the best way to do it. And then, if we agree, then we'll reach out to you.
All three. Everyone agrees.
Everyone agrees, and the either the terms undefined, and then we talk about what sort of are the terms to offer based on the team, the opportunity, the progress of the company, and so on and so forth, and we'll just agree on the valuation and an amount to be invested. Or if the terms are set, then we'll just say, okay, we'll offer to invest X, understanding that we never invest less than $250, and we will try to own at least 5% of the company. And sometimes there will be a bit of discussion around the terms. There will be a bit of discussion around the valuation, around the ownership. But we're pretty set in terms of what we do, and we typically.
And it's worked. It's worked in the past.
Yep.
So okay, so there are a few more gates. So you have the partner meeting. Everybody agrees. And by the way, I think these things they make a lot of sense. I think it's great for me, at least as an entrepreneur, to hear, hey, like sometimes you read about these things in TechCrunch or something. It's like, oh gosh, how did those guys got money? Are you freaking kidding me? And it's like, well, hey, you know what? Like these guys, they got through. They went through this process, right? It's not like somebody just walked up to them on the street.
At least with us,
I'm guessing.
Some others have different processes, or lack thereof.
So I get through that gate. Everyone likes me, and I'm one of the best companies that you've seen that month. And then I get a wire transfer or something with money?
Well,
When do we get? When does that happen? I'm Bank of
You like
America.
PayPal?
What are you guys?
we're SVB, they rock. So we make an offer to you, and there lies, the choice that you have to make, which is that,
I'm gonna say yes. I'm just gonna put it
Well-
out there. How many people in here are gonna say yes to that?
well, but think.
You're
think,
lying, everyone
right?
else.
Because at the end of the day, you might be a really sort of hot company, and therefore you might have many options in terms of funding opportunities. You might have us, tell you we'll give you $500,000 at X, and this is how we can help. And you might be oversubscribed. Let's say you want to raise $1 million, and you have like 5 million or 10 million in front of you. Which ones of those hundreds of thousands are you actually going to pick up? And the right answer is, you should essentially raise money from the people who, A, are the most passionate about what you're trying to build, and B, will be the most useful and the most present for you in terms of, support and help and, cajoling and kicks in the ass and everything, so that over that period of time that your seed will be your primary investment, you will really sort of be supported. And in some cases, SoftTech might, yes, we're great investors, but we might not be the most relevant or the best investors for you. If you're doing something in payment, the PayPal mafia is much better than we are, because they've lived through all the issue of building a worldwide payment system, including all the fraud crap that is sort of pretty horrible with payment mechanisms. But if you want to do a mobile payment, my partner Charles is one of the best investors you can think of. And so figuring out what you need from your investors, and unfortunately, brand is important, it's good, it helps for the next round, but expertise and support is really, and what the syndicate of investors can deliver is the most important thing that you can get from us, besides the money. The money is almost irrelevant, to be honest. It's a commodity. What matters is the help. And so it's not because we say yes to you that then you will say yes to us. You should, but, just saying.
What percentage of entrepreneurs would you say do not take an offer from you guys?
I would say it happens a couple of times a year.
Okay.
So of the 20 we invest in, we might have expressed interest, 22 or 23 times.
Yeah. Okay. So so let's get past that part. So I decide, you're the most strategic.
So you tell me yes.
Yeah, let's do this. Right, I'm in.
So then, so then there is the legal work, right? So there is paperwork to work on before money exchanges hands. So either we go for a convertible note, so a debt structure, sort of simple to put together and overly used and abused over the past couple of years. But let's say that this is a legit structure. We will want to cap the conversion at which the conversion valuation at which we'll convert. So let's say we agree we use debt, but this is a for pre note, and so we know at what valuation we'll invest. We sort of get the lawyers to agree on the actual form. We send the signature pages, so I send you massive pages, and then you give me your wire instruction, and then I instruct my guys to wire the money. And so it takes, for a convert note, once we've said agree, we agree on the terms, we agree, it takes 3 to 5 days to actually make it happen. If it's an equity round, so we actually buy shares in your company, it takes a couple of weeks, and then we do a close. Everyone sort of sends you the money, and suddenly you sit on $500 or $750,000 in your bank account.
Have you guys ever done a cash transaction? Because that's what I would want. I would want it in bills.
I've done many
unmarked
things.
Bills.
I have done many things, but I've never done the
set a red flag. Set a red flag at that. Whoa!
Here is my 300. No, what I've done a couple of times, and I almost never do that, is someone actually came to see me for advice and left with a check, and I put that check on the table saying, I really like what you're doing. You had already raised money. You wasn't raising money. And I said, not only will you get the advice, you will get the cash. See whether you can actually cash that check. And I remember his face. He was like, can you do that? I'm like, sure. and then he left, and then he calls his investors like, that dude you introduced me to, just give me a check. What the fuck do I do with that? And then I had a conversation with the investors, and finally we actually sort of got them to accept our check. So it worked.
So in terms of
I did that once.
So you talked about picking the right investors for the right reasons. Talk quickly about some of the added value things that you guys do. Are you going to join my board? Are you going to help me hire? Are you going to help me, strategically? What are the, and I know it varies, right, by company and by expertise, right, like you kind of said earlier. If they need me, if it's my domain expertise, yeah, I might join the board. But what would you say generally, someone could expect? What value add do they get from you?
So if we help you put the round together and we buy 10% of the company, typically we'll join the board. And I only sit on 6 boards, and for me to join a new board, I have to leave one of the existing 6 boards, and that's a good way of just self-limiting the time I spend on board seats. And typically after 2 years, which is the time by which you will either be dead or funded by the next guy, I will leave the board. In terms of support, so think of the seed stage as being really different from the traditional VCs that do Series A. At Series A level, you work with one partner, and you're one interface to the sort of traditional VC world. When you invest, you get an investment from a bunch of seed guys. It's a syndicate, it's a collection of angels, micro VCs, these days, traditional VCs, and your goal as an entrepreneur is really to try and maximize the value you're going to get from that syndicate. So you're going to pick, people are really good at, your vertical and customer acquisition and potentially monetization and so on and so forth, so that the collection of expertise and skill set will be really sort of complementary around the table. And we, as the lead or one of the followers, will try and understand what you need from us. We're really good at, strategy, product, customer acquisition lifecycle. My partner Charles is he's one of the experts in terms of mobile gaming, mobile user acquisition, mobile monetization, social gaming in general. And so there's a lot of things that we're really good at, and we'll be able to sort of play an important, not so important, or sort of point-to-point sort of role, depending on what you need us to do. Because the last thing that we need is to feel that we're important to you because we suck a lot of your time. Because you're here to build a company, you're not here to hang out with us. And unfortunately, some early-stage entrepreneurs or early entrepreneurs or sort of the first-timers forget that. It's not because you hang out with your investors a lot that you actually spend your time wisely. So you have to figure out what you need us for. The best thing is when I get an email or a call from one of my CEOs saying, I need this from you, and here's the paragraph I'm going to give you so that you can introduce me to those 2 guys, or can we spend like 10 minutes to discuss that one question? It's very sort of focused. It can be done really, really quickly, and we can therefore add value in increments of 5 to 10 minutes or 15 minutes. So it's we try and establish those rules early on, and that's one of the reasons why we try and invest a lot in the Valley and in a few clusters, is that a lot of that non-written communication you actually get right by spending time with people. And so we get tremendous value by just having our guys hang out with us. We go hang out with them, and for the ones who are in Boulder or New York or whatever, we get a lot of value of hanging out with them. So this sort of hand-to-hand combat is really important.
We're gonna take a bunch of questions from the Startup Grind iOS app. So if you want to ask a question, jump on there and quickly ask it. But I want to ask you one thing before we do that. So I'm gonna skip way ahead. So I took your money.
Yep.
You guys invested in us. Really appreciate it. And then 2 years goes, we work like crazy, we try really hard, product doesn't get traction, right? So at that point, what happens? So I'm maybe 6 months out, I'm going to run out of money, and I'm probably not going to be able to raise money again. What happens to companies like that? I mean, we see, you see these things happen in the press where, oh, so-and-so got bought. It's amazing, and a lot of these, there's a lot of talk about acquisitions for hires. What is that? How does that process work? what happens? Do you meet and say, okay, this isn't working out. Let's see, if there's a good fit somewhere. How does that process work?
So that's part of the bag of tricks of investors. So first and foremost, we don't wait for you being almost out of cash to figure out what to do with you, because by definition at that time it's too late. So we'll meet regularly. You'll send us update. It's going to be either on the phone or visits or whatever, and we'll sort of plot your progress. And one of the things that we'll ask you to give us and to revise is what is the set of milestones that you see yourself achieving over the course of your seed financing. It's the proverbial sort of 18 months runway that we give you by investing, let's say $1 million or $500,000 or whatever. And we'll try and measure progress along the way. And obviously, it's very, I wouldn't say it's bullshit because it's important, but what matters is to be able to predict a little bit whether things are working per the plan or they need to be sort of revised, and that's okay to revise, but at least we have some kind of a benchmark to track against. And if ever things really don't work for the first 6 months, we'll sit down and we'll sort of figure out, what has gone wrong, what we've learned, what's different, what's not working, what we could change, and so on and so forth, so that we have another, second shot or third shot at the prize. And sometimes we'll say, look, this is just not working, or assumptions that we could get people to pay us for this, or we could get traction doing that, is just not working. And those are the wrong assumptions, and therefore we'd like to go do this. And one of the recent well-known sort of pivots, it's a pivot, has been Fab.com. So anyone has used Fab.com? Okay, you spend a lot of money on that site, sorry. So it used to be, a social network, vertical social network focused on gay men. And Jason, who's the CEO, decided that after 3 months after launch, he was just not getting the level of customer acquisition and retention that he needed to build, sort of a gay Facebook. And we thought that based on the sort of the income of that population, it was actually feasible to build something which was interesting in terms of company, but we just didn't have enough users on that website. And so they decided to move to a flash sales model for design items that they had tested on the old Fab.com, and it just took off like crazy, and it's now one of the fastest growing e-commerce website that anyone has ever seen. Yeah. And could we predict it? No. Are we lucky? Yes. Are we liking it? Hell yeah. And so the point is that Jason looked at his matrix and said, I can either go do something else which I'm passionate about, or I can just give you guys your money, because I'm just not going to waste my time and your cash doing something which I'm not passionate about. And so we'll try and sort of have those conversations, and they rarely happen abruptly. Yeah. When things don't work out, you sort of feel it and you try and course correct and so on and so forth. And then to answer your question, after a year, if things haven't really sort of worked per se, or it's worked, but basically we know that 6 months later you won't be able to raise money, because if there's one thing that we have a good sense of, it's the pulse of money. Who's going to get funded and who's not going to get funded in the portfolio. And so if we think we have a decent shot, then we'll go for it, and we'll make all the intros, and we'll pitch you and pimp you and do all the things we do to actually make things happen. But if ever we sort of have a sense that it's not going to be a productive use of your time, then yes, we'll go to acquirers who could be a good fit for you, both in terms of what you've built and your vision and your passion. And if we sort of nail that equation between the potential acquirer and you, then typically will be a good outcome. And we've had certainly a bunch of good outcomes, and one of the most recent one is this company called GoodRec, which had a fantastic team of mobile developers who had built some kind of a Yelp recommendation engine on iOS, built a great product but never got the distribution nailed, ended up being acquired by Groupon a year and a half ago, and depending as to how Groupon fares, will return half or a third of the fund that invested in this company just because of Groupon. So we were like tremendously lucky that we got that equation working, and we negotiated the deal that will work out for us. To be honest, that's the fairy tale version, because the real version is most hire are pretty brutal for the investors, and that's this one thing which unfortunately has been hanging out for a couple of years, or a year at least, is that from an investor standpoint, if you win big, and if you don't win and the thing doesn't work, then you can always sort of sell your company to Google and make your money back or more. So it's a win-win, like Vegas. And so it's the good old days of, if you win, you win, and if you lose, you just lose your money. And welcome to the reality of angels.
Yeah. So 2 out of 20 maybe go on to raise a Series A or a larger round. Maybe they raise a Series A, they raise another round. What percentage of those would you say just completely die, and what percentage get acquired, by somebody? Is it?
There's some companies, because of the capital efficiency of that cluster of companies, you could actually just reduce yourself to the bone and have like 2 or 3 guys and make enough money to actually survive and pay your bills, which is fine.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not dying, and that's certainly why you have a bunch of companies which have managed to just survive and stick around, and so on and so forth. The issue is that because they raise money in the first place, they will never be able to return either capital or a profit on that capital, because the mental model for us when we look at something is that we invest X, but we think that in the best potential circumstances, that thing we invest in will return 10x, which is sort of the basic threshold or more, because given the number of companies that failed, the number of companies that return just capital or 2x capital or 3x capital, which doesn't matter, given that our own objective is to return the fund multiple times, and multiple times as in greater than 4, then we need to have companies that will make a lot of money to us, 10x, 20x, 30x, to make our own math work. And so
a couple of questions here from the app. This one is from Mike. Is it still early in the game for mobile tablet entrepreneurship, or is the peak window of opportunity closed?
I certainly don't see that the peak has been reached. Certainly tablets have done much better in terms of penetration that anyone anticipated, especially this thing. And so I've looked early at a couple of tablet plays, and I had the, in retrospect, stupid assumption that they were too early to be tablet-only type opportunities. So I think that if you can prove that the sector that you're targeting has enough of those tablets sort of being in terms of penetration, and you can actually justify a revenue which is not selling apps, because selling apps sucks as a business model. You don't make money and you don't build a big company if you sell apps, unless you're Rovio and you have Angry Birds. Hello. Because otherwise, you don't make hundreds of millions. But you just use this as a conduit to sell a service, then yes, I think it's definitely feasible.
What you have this is from David Kaufman. You have the categories that you guys invest in on your website, but is there anything in the last few weeks or months that you have found particularly exciting? Any categories within technology that are particularly exciting to you over the course of the last few weeks or months?
So the couple of things that we spend a lot of time on is around this whole sort of peer-to-peer marketplaces, or what people call collaborative consumptions. So we've looked at a fair amount of different verticals. The one thing that we like a lot is we call business-to-peer. So it's a peer-to-peer marketplace where one of the sides of the marketplace is provided by businesses. And so in the case of Gigwork, one of our companies, that's what we do, we pimp our companies. So Gigwork has the supply side of tasks managed and sort of taken care of by large companies like TomTom or Microsoft. And so when Microsoft comes on the marketplace, they drop 100,000 tasks, which is basically worth half a million or $750,000, as opposed to having those tasks to be collected one by one. And so that's one thing that we like a lot. The mobile services economy, as I said, is really sort of interesting to us. We were lucky to be investors in Tapula, so we sat in.
We're here, right? First floor.
Yeah, they actually, funny enough, they started as incubated in my office on High Street in Palo Alto, and now we're in the same building after they've been acquired. And so we were on the front row of looking at what it means to have a number one, number two app on the App Store day of launch, and that was sort of like that. It was a real rocket, and we got to 40 or 50 million installs, which is massive in the world of mobile. But it doesn't mean that you can actually build a big company. We think that you can actually build a really big company or big companies leveraging mobile distribution, but having an alternate business model.
I mean, there are some, right? Foursquare, Instagram, but are you saying that those are just so few and far between that, do we just rule those out, or is
well, so those are, I mean, Instagram is the one company I would have done, I would have done a lot to actually invest in, but unfortunately they were done by the time I reached out to them. And they've cracked distribution because they got to 10 million users in 1 year with 6 dudes. And what is that distribution strategy? Just have a fantastic product that just people rave about. And I just love Instagram, right? But if you ask Kevin how much money is made and what's his revenue model, he doesn't care, because he can raise any money he wants from the investment world. And Foursquare is a good example. They've really sort of nailed a number of things, and they're definitely the thought leader in the LBS space, but it's not a business. And so for us, when we think about Postmates, when we think about Gigwalk, we think businesses. We're building businesses that are already churning, for some hundreds of thousands of dollars in revenue.
I thought a Fitbit is another good example. It seems like that. I think a lot of people kind of scratched their head at the time where, hey, here's this hardware device. Oh, there it is right there. Yeah, here's this hardware device mixed with tech. What place does that have? And now, as the years have gone on, it's been out for what, a year and a half or something.
So we invested in right around TechCrunch 15 2008. It took them a year to figure out the mass production issues, because hardware startups and hardware plays suck because they have to be produced. And so, James Park, our CEO, spent countless nights on the fab floors in Malaysia to figure out, the kinks of the mass production. And so they launched for real for Christmas 2009. And since then, they've sold a couple of devices, and they've been doing extremely well.
This is again another question from the app. Do you have any examples of entrepreneurs that you've reached out to or cold called who did not reach out to you that you ended up investing in? Is there precedence for something like that? Or do you not need to? You're getting 40 pitches a month, so you.
Most of what we do is inbound. So I have a funny story. So in our world, you never know where the next deal is going to come from, and so you have to be ready for it. Despite that, we don't really pay much attention to the cold emails. But I remember being at the first blogging conference called BlogOn, and I was trying to sit next to Tony Schneider, who had just sold Outposts. So we're talking about 2004, very early days of Web 2.0, because he was the cool kid because he had sold his company for 25 million to Yahoo. So everyone wanted to sort of sit next to him, and I couldn't, because there was just a mob around him. And so I had those two guys sitting next to me, and they were entrepreneurs from LA. So web entrepreneurs from LA in 2004. I'm like, oh God, I'm gonna waste my time. And it just so happens that one of them was the future CEO of MySpace, right?
Krista Wolf?
No, that was the last one. And so Mike was there representing Userplane, which was his company at that time. And we sort of sympathized, and there was those two guys who had one of the very first photo sharing websites back in 2004, BuzzNet, and I ended up sort of becoming friends with them. I invested in both of them and made a bunch of money on Userplane, and Mike is certainly a really good friend now. especially as he's out of MySpace. The Buzznet is still going, has raised a bunch of money, so we're sort of tiny investors in the cap table. It's and Anthony Batt is, funny enough, the guy running Catalyst Media for Ashton Kutcher.
Huh.
So when you sort of find those connections, sometimes you actually don't know where they will end up, and it's good sort of to have an open mind. But the issue is the law of large numbers make it difficult to have an open mind.
Let's take one or two questions from the audience, and then we're going to wrap up. Anybody have one? Anybody? Yeah, right here.
You said some investors invest because it's cool to invest. Is it cooler to invest in newer, cooler types of businesses, or is something that has been invested before, consumer internet, all that?
So, let me.
How does the type of a startup play and how cool it is perceived as an investment?
Okay, can I repeat this question so we get it on tape? If I can get it right.
You want me to try?
Yeah, maybe you should try.
Because it's actually a great question. So, what's coolest to invest in? A brand new startup or in a hot sector that is sort of potentially unproven, or something which has been, already proven and is already hot, and, should you go for one or another? And so, first and foremost, when people reach out to me and say, I want to become an angel investor, I want to invest, can I join your syndicate? I want to understand what motivates them, what drives them. And if ever it's to name drop, I invest in X, Y, or Z, the same way you would drop, the brand of your car or the name of your girlfriend, typically I don't have much patience for that, because at the end of the day, the reason why we do this is because we're deeply passionate about backing entrepreneurs and being there for them as they go through the ups and downs of entrepreneurship. And you might think it's bullshit, but that's true. That's why we do this, and that's why we work 7/24 at the same rhythm as our entrepreneurs. So the coolness of things is not really our thing. We actually like very unsexy verticals and things which are sort of under the radar, because that's what gives us an opportunity to build something and give it some velocity before it becomes clear it's successful. Because by that time you have a bunch of entrepreneurs and a bunch of other investors who will actually try and fund the same thing. And so these days you have to think about that. Typically something which is hot gets overpriced and competitive, and we just don't play in that game.
Okay, let's do one more right here.
We were introduced via mutual contact, and I'd like to know if we can talk afterwards.
Oh, awesome. This is why we don't take questions from the audience.
That was a bit too personal.
Yeah, let's do one more right here in the blue sweater, and then we'll wrap it up.
So, how do you focus on the exit strategy also when you are reviewing the earlier proposal or something? Because you talked about team, business idea, and all that.
So we spend a lot of time figuring out that there is a business opportunity for that startup. We never think about, okay, who's going to buy that from us? And actually, here's a tip. If ever you pitch someone like us, where we really don't care about the exit, if you give us, if you have a slide with the list of companies that are going to buy you, and the time frame, and the actual internal rate of return we'll extract from that, you just shot yourself in the foot. And I'll go with sort of the Sequoia approach. Sequoia believes that good things happen to good companies, and good companies are acquired, they're not bought. And so you really want to sort of get in there and think that this is the one thing that you want to do for the next 5, 7, 10 years, which is why the passion that we'll try and sort of understand chatting with you is so important, because you will have to break through walls and walk on fire to actually make this thing successful, right? It's going to be hard. It's blood, sweat, and tears, but that's what ultimately gets you to a good situation where you have a company which is working, which is generating a lot of money, and has a market momentum, and has a bunch of and you can actually build a team behind, and at that time something good will happen. And we've been some companies like Brightroll, we've been invested for 6 years, and Todd, the CEO, is still going for it, and he now has a very viable and inviable market position. And I don't think that unless there is a lot of money coming on the table, he would want to actually sell it. Same thing for Kevin Hart at Eventbrite. you can't attend an event without having the event powered by Eventbrite now. And Kevin will just take this thing to the moon and we'll put it in the public market. That's what he wants to do. Anything less doesn't matter. And so this sort of notion of short-term exitability is not really interesting to us. Whether we think that what you're building is interesting, whether we think that this is something that we can eventually take to someone in 18 months and raise a Series A on, we definitely ask ourselves that question, to be honest, because in this environment where we believe that it's going to get pretty tight to raise your Series A unless you're really sort of performing well, we're actually asking ourselves that. And if you are part of the few companies that meet with me, you will hear me asking that question, which is, how do you define success 12 months down the road? How do you think about yourselves? What do I look at when I look at your team and your company in 12 months' time? And it's not so much a guarantee, it's just trying to understand how you project yourself.
Can we give Jeff a big round of applause for coming?
Thank you so much.